Zelensky publicly confronts Trump again. Tensions rise over Ukraine's strategy.
Shortly after a surprise phone call between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly criticized the growing ties between the White House and the Kremlin. According to Ukraine's Strana news outlet, following the unexpected 70-minute conversation on June 4th between Trump and Putin, Zelensky issued a sharp statement on Telegram, expressing concern over any diplomatic engagement with Moscow. Many people have spoken with Russia at various levels. None of those conversations have led to real peace or an end to the war. Unfortunately, Putin feels no guilt, and even after all the horrific airstrikes, he is reportedly preparing more retaliation, Zelensky wrote. Zelensky also indirectly blamed Trump for enabling Putin's aggression, noting that Trump had not pushed back on Putin's warning of a strong response to Ukraine's drone attacks on Russian air bases. If the powerful cannot stop Putin, they must share responsibility. And if they want to stop him but cannot, then Putin no longer sees them as powerful, Zelensky added. The phone call reportedly included discussions on Ukraine's recent spiderweb drone operation. Putin labelled Ukraine's actions as terrorism and warned of significant retaliation. The Russian strategic bombers targeted by Ukraine were stationed in open areas without shelter as part of a requirement under a nuclear arms limitation treaty agreed upon by Russia and the United States. According to the treaty, both nations are obligated to keep strategic bombers in visible, uncovered areas to ensure transparency for satellite surveillance. These aircraft must remain uncamouflaged, and their numbers are recorded and monitored under the treaty terms. The bombers that were hit had to be visible because of nuclear treaty obligations. Zelensky exploited this, wrote General Michael Flynn, former National Security Advisor to President Trump, on X. Flynn further warned anyone with access to cheap drones, a delivery truck, explosives, and some basic technical knowledge could destroy extremely expensive US strategic bombers in the same way. In other words, the US also stores its missile-carrying bombers similarly to Russia, making them theoretically vulnerable to similar attacks. At the same time, Flynn condemned Ukraine's strikes on the air bases. If it's true that our president was neither consulted nor briefed, this isn't just a breach of protocol, it's a geopolitical insult and a warning sign. If Ukraine is willing to carry out strategically consequential attacks without notifying the White House, we're no longer allied in coordination. We're flying blind as adversaries.
Trump reveals Putin's chilling threat to Ukraine during phone call.
US President Donald Trump stated that during a phone call on Wednesday, June 4th, Russian President Vladimir Putin told him about plans to retaliate against Ukraine's recent attacks on Russian air bases. President Trump said he spoke with Putin on the phone for an hour and 15 minutes, during which they discussed the attacks in Ukraine and Iran. We discussed the Ukrainian drone strike on Russian aircraft parked on the tarmac, as well as several other attacks happening on both sides. It was a good conversation, but not one that will lead to immediate peace, Trump shared on social media. President Putin said, and said it very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the air bases, Trump said. Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov later revealed details about the call, confirming that the Russian leader spoke at length about Ukraine's strikes on Russian airfields. Ukraine attempted to sabotage the negotiations by launching, under direct orders from the Kyiv regime, deliberate attacks on civilian targets and peaceful people. The Russian side did not yield to this provocation, and the second round, as is known, was held in Istanbul, Ushakov stated. He added that President Putin accused the Kyiv regime of essentially becoming a terrorist organization. You know how they deal with terrorists, but this does not exclude the possibility that negotiations may not proceed in a constructive direction, which is often necessary to reach certain solutions, he said. Ushakov noted that President Putin spoke in detail about the outcome of the second round of negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul and expressed hope for continued dialogue after both sides review a draft memorandum of resolution. The two presidents also discussed other international issues, particularly the Middle East conflict, and how Russia might support efforts to resolve the Iran issue and its nuclear program. The Kremlin aide stated that Trump told Putin Washington had not been informed in advance about Ukraine's attacks. Trump's envoy to Ukraine warned that the risk of war escalation in Ukraine is now significantly heightened after the strikes. Russia and the United States are currently the world's two largest nuclear powers, together holding about 88% of the total global nuclear arsenal. Each side possesses a nuclear triad: strategic bombers, ground-launched intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs. And any attack on one element of this triad is considered a serious escalation.